Thank you all for joining. Ecosystem community members, we're always grateful to have such great attendance and a very topical subject right now. How do we maintain our productivity in a work from home world? How do we conquer this thing called remote selling? So a really interesting topic, and we have some terrific folks to help lead the session. Let me just give you a brief overview. Before I do so, I should just say, I really sincerely hope that you are healthy, you're sane, you're with your loved ones in very uncertain times. So we're happy for you to join us. Our format today is we're going to talk about the real challenges and disruptions that we're seeing in this environment. And everything from family disruptions to added stress to how do I maintain my productivity going forward. So we'll have a thoughtful discussion on disruptions and challenges. We have the unique opportunity because of our members. We have folks that have really been in a virtual selling environment for years. So I think that's wonderful that they can share their tips, tactics, even if we get one nugget from today. Hopefully that will be helpful, right? So we're going to go through some emerging best practices, and then we're going to talk about how do we look at digital collaboration? How do we make sure that we're being productive in this environment? And then finally, a little sneak peek into what we call elements of value. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. So with that, let's introduce our members. So we have Lori Harmon. Lori is brings a really unique perspective. Lori is 20 years in virtual selling. And so she's going to help lead our conversation around how somebody is productive and what honed techniques and tactics she's used to be effective. And so we're grateful to have her. She's Vice President of Worldwide Sales for Virtual Sales for NetApp, and she'll be co-hosting our session, along with our next person here. A little bit of a delay is Somesh Chablani with FIS. And like Lori, Somesh comes from a virtual selling background, digital sales, and spans a lot of different functions. So he'll be able to kind of talk about how you become productive, how you ultimately maintain a level of intimacy with customers in a virtual environment. And then finally, in our kind of holy trinidad of folks that are coming, our three core leaders, we have Mark Tefakis. Mark is the Vice President of Sales at Sprinklr, brings 25 years of experience. What is interesting is Mark's going to bring that field sales perspective. He's been in sales operations, sales enablement, and in a field sales role. So we're going to have folks that are part of this discussion that really grew up in a virtual selling environment. We have folks that are pivoting to a virtual selling environment, and we feel like that communication will be excellent as they share different experiences. And so with that, I will turn it over to Mark to help lead our session and maybe just provide a little context to it. So again, we're in a new world. Everybody's at home. It begs a lot of questions on, gosh, how am I productive? How do I maintain the right level of conversations with my customers? What is the right conversation? Should I be selling? Should I be supporting? What's the right times in terms of interactions with the customer? It just begs a whole bunch of questions that come up in this environment. And hopefully today we'll do a thoughtful job on what we're seeing together as a community and bring out some nuggets on best practices and then talk about some potential ways to operate going forward. And so with that, I'll let Mark jump in and lead us through this first discussion around the challenges and disruptions that he's seeing, and we'll open it up for others to talk as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Chad and Kasha and the members of the ecosystem. I hope you're all, I echo Chad's comments earlier, I hope you're all safe and well and managing your way through this this crazy time for sure. But there's light at the end of the tunnel. I'm a firm believer in that. And some of the things that we'll talk about today is I truly do believe there's a silver lining to everything, and it's our job as leaders, especially if we're leaders of people, to expose that light and help them manage their way through it. So what I'm going to talk about here is there's actually 9. I'll start on the left with these 5 and then progress to the right side of the screen with an additional 4. And the way that I thought about this is I broke it down into sort of 4 categories, which is distractions, stress or uncertainty, empathetic personal connection, and effectiveness. And effectiveness is both internal and external. Internal with how you manage in this the challenge that we have today, the operating rhythm with your team, keeping an eye on the prize, which is, protecting the base, salvaging the business that you work so hard to get, but also thinking in terms of how you can grow. And then externally, how are you effectively and efficiently executing with the client base and the market that you're going after? The one maybe out of these first 5 that I would call out, which is we'll talk about in a little bit with Lori and Somesh, is best practices around selling in this new sort of virtual climate. Is we don't have the luxury today to have that personal connection with our clients. It's video, it's via phone. We can't get in a room. We can't take notice of body language as we go through discovery and qualification of an opportunity. Therefore, we also lose the ability to do whiteboarding and tight collaboration. Very difficult to do. I know there's technology out there that you can use to do some whiteboarding, but it's just not the same when you can engage one-on-one in a conference room or a room where you can both get on the board. So that was a pretty interesting one. And I think it's prevalent. I'm seeing it with my team today on, we can't ask people to come to a 2-hour meeting in a virtual setting. It's just, you start to lose interest quickly. So how do you condense that all down, but still maintain the effectiveness of how you carry the conversation and the sale? To the right, we talk about mobilizing stakeholders. And I think, Chad, you might have had a video out there where you kind of showed a dark, sort of office setting, and people just aren't there in the cubicles or the offices. And so the Challenger sale talks about mobilizing, finding the mobilizer within our account base that can drive a lot of the interest and sell on our behalf when we're not there. Not only is it challenging to get that mobilizer and identify them, asking them to go sell on our behalf and be a champion to the path we're trying to take is even more difficult for them, also in this virtual environment. So I think it's tough. And then naturally, I have a responsibility for a pretty broad team across the U.S. South and into South America and Mexico and Central America. So it's a pretty big dispersed team. It's how do you manage personal touch points? And it doesn't have to be a half an hour or an hour long meeting that you have. We've incorporated things like these pulse check or heartbeat meetings where, it's 15 minutes, each morning where we get on, and it's not always something about the business. It's about the family, something personal, but it keeps that connection to the team. So some really interesting things here that I think jump out and probably pretty common to a lot of us. What I would do is actually maybe ask one of my peers on this particular subject and topic, Lori, if you've got anything that you would like to add that you're seeing according to this list.
Thanks a lot, Mark. I appreciate that. And I thought you love how you packaged this into 4 different areas and covered it. And a couple key things to touch on. You were saying how it's not the same, and you're right. It's not the same if you're trying to whiteboard, even though your technology is available. It's not the same as being in the room. I think one of the things we have to deal with long-term is never is a pretty dramatic word, but it could be a really long time before it becomes the same. And some of the things I'm seeing going forward is that we are going to see a bigger shift in the market towards virtual selling. And I think that's brought on by the technology that's available, and more will be coming available because of this. The drive that buyers may prefer to have a virtual meeting. Maybe it's more convenient for them. And also companies may say, hey, whatever, we saved a lot of money in travel during this time. Maybe we want to push our sellers a little bit to have more virtual meetings. And sellers who may not have been virtual sellers previously could experience a lot more productivity. And they may go, hey, instead of 4 face-to-face meetings on site, maybe I'll have 2 face-to-face meetings and 4 virtual meetings, and that will allow me to get more done. So I think it is causing us to rethink how we approach this virtual sales because of the challenges and disruptions we're having right now, and because it's not the same. And you mentioned the Challenger sale, which is actually one of my favorite methodologies too, and the fact that you can't have people at 2-hour meetings. So it does also force us to rethink our messaging and to make it a lot more crisp and potentially challenging and about the value to the customer, so we can get that across faster because we have a lot less time to spend with them. So I think some things are really positive in the rethinking part, but completely agree that it's challenging to actually go through that and figure out how to do it. And so let me turn it over to Somesh for a few additional comments.
Yeah, thanks, Laurie. My observation and comments are similar to what Mark and you mentioned. When at FIS, I have the privilege of managing 2 global teams, which is virtual sales and global business development. For us, it's not the new normal, but these interesting times, I think the fundamental observation and challenge is the noise and the ambiguity it has created. For me, I think it's a test for the leader, just not on integrity, but on communication and how are you keeping your staff motivated and focused. Because the staff, once they are motivated, they will always be the client's cheerleaders. And they will always remember how did the leader approach them, communicate with them, and more importantly, how did we take care of them in these unprecedented times. So that's one very common challenge which I'm observing. And as I said, it's all about communication and leadership.
Excellent, excellent perspective. Kasha, I would like to see us maybe open this up to the broader audience and maybe get a perspective from other members of the ecosystem, what they're experiencing out there. Is there something that is additive to the list of 9 that we had out there? I'm sure there's probably something that we might be missing that they can add to the conversation.
Sounds great. Yeah, let's, who would like to, this is Chad. I just want to kind of facilitate some community input and do a quick summary. I love a couple points. I just want to repackage back. I love Mark's concept of the pulse checks. I think that's a real interesting nugget. More timely check-ins on a personal level with people, and particularly salespeople being very gregarious and liking human contact. So I like that concept of the pulse checks. Really resonate with Laurie's point about refocusing the messaging on value and making it succinct. We don't have the benefit of context and human back and forth. It has to really stand on its own on a screen, on a Zoom screen, so to speak. And then Somesh's point about leadership and being hyper communicative is just spot on as we deal with folks. What are other members feeling, sensing, or being challenged with that we may not have addressed here?
This is a quiet group. We usually have a lot more people commenting.
Hey, Chad, I'll chime in for a second. I think maybe one other one has probably already been touched on is uncertainty. We're selling into an environment where more than ever, our contacts are worried about their own job. They're not sure on their budget. They're not sure what their office or environment looks like when they return to work, et cetera, in terms of, how will this impact how they all work together? So it's easier to have a list of excuses right now of why they can't move forward with a particular project. There's just a longer list of uncertainties.
Totally. Thank you, Grad. Sales leader at HP. Love that perspective. And I just picked up something Steve put into the Zoom chat, which I think is an interesting one, is the whole concept of what do we think about this Zoom fatigue? We're on it at levels we've not been at for many of us. Anybody feeling the fatigue? Anybody seeing that fatigue manifest itself with the team?
I think, Chad, I read that article yesterday. It came up from Axios. It was interesting. Most of us probably have been on you're up 8 to 10 Zoom calls a day and you're just going from one room to another. And it brought up some interesting points about the modality of human interaction in the Zoom world, because you get, we don't normally look at ourselves, and now you get to see your reaction and their reaction. And I think some of it actually resonates in terms of, fatigue. And at the end of the article, they say, you know what, the phone still works.
Yeah.
The one-on-one phone call still works as well.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'd be curious what others think about it, because it's I thought it was an interesting article that called out some pretty valid points about and they did some studies around human interaction here and the change that it's forced people into, because it's not a comfort zone everybody's in.
Yeah.
Well, I like your point, Steve, about, hey, the phone still works. Obviously, for those of us who've been doing virtual sales for a long time, most of us have moved to an omni-channel approach. So we're using phone and email and social. Social's really taken off a lot with the pandemic. And of course, sometimes it's chat, but that's because either people are coming to us on our website to chat with us, or maybe you have a chat application at your company. So I definitely think that having the omni-channel approach and multiple modalities to work with your buyers and customers is really important to try to mix it up, because as I agree, people are like, it's one after another, right? You're just churning out all these Zoom meetings. So try something different.
Yeah. Hey, this is Abi Inglot. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, one of the things, talking about the salespeople, I think salespeople are naturally gregarious, as you said. And, in this environment where your win rates can be, dropping by 50, 60, 70%, I think you just need to do some extra care and feeding in terms of giving them a pat on the back, right? So one of the things that we do is we are trying to basically any proposal that goes out, right? We make a big deal of it, right? If you get to the point where a customer takes a meeting in this situation, actually entertains a proposal, regardless whether you win or lose, we celebrate that. And we make a point of, making sure that people understand, look, this is a scenario in which we expect the win rates to be lower. So you got to step up more often and take a shot. And it's absolutely okay to, take a shot which doesn't go through. So we're making extra effort to kind of communicate that, so people are emboldened to go out and put proposals, obviously being tone sensitive and not being tone deaf with customers, right? On this dimension. The other thing we do is, because you get zoomed out or WebExed out, or you name whatever you might do might be your favorite paradigm. I try to do in the evenings walk and talks with each of the people that I'm trying to stay close to, and those have actually been quite good, and also try to keep the COVID-19 pounds off, right, from being in the house. So those have been quite successful.
Yeah, that's excellent. I'll add one more additional comment here. I think it's really great dialogue. One of the things that I'm really fixated on right now is burnout. Meaning, it's not just burnout going to virtual meetings. We know we have more time available because we're not having to be in transit to an airport or driving to a customer, and so the challenge becomes with the AAA personality and drive that we love to have with our salespeople. Are they blocking so many meetings from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and it's back to back to back to back to back, and then they pride themselves at the end of the day that they've attended all these meetings, but some of the operational administrative stuff didn't get done. So now they're maybe having dinner with the family and then back on the computer in the evening to do the rest of their job. At some point, they're going to hit a wall. And so what I've been encouraging the teams to do is block out blocks of time during the course of the day to either have that as personal time to do the other aspects of your job, or go out and go around the block, go outside, get some fresh air, recharge. Because if you're just going from 8 to 6, meeting after meeting after meeting, at some point, you're going to be super fatigued and crash. And then it's a negative reaction.
And Mark, I totally agree with that. So I used to work out at 5:30 every morning, but I switched that to now being like middle of the day, so I can get out and get some fresh air and kind of break up the day. So I think that really is effective to do that.
Hey, Chad and team, this is Bill Welch. I just had a question for the group here. A couple things. One is, what have you seen as a result of, now that conferences have been canceled, whether it's HIMSS, whether it's, Gartner, there's all kinds of conferences. What have you been doing with your marketing teams to recalibrate that money to the use in digital and social and thought leadership? And then a more multi-part of this question is your technical advisory board meetings, your customer advisory board meetings. I'm hosting one today. Chad knows our technical advisory board. What have you seen as far as bringing customers into this to help sell on the value of the offerings you have sold them already to create pipeline. I mean, being very candid, I mean, we still have to run businesses. And I'd just love to hear what you guys are doing. Number one, to recalibrate marketing dollars, and then two, what you're seeing as far as customer value interactions.
Well, for us at NetApp, so we've moved some of our dollars over to more digital marketing, but we've also taken a lot of the events, like our customer event in Europe. We had it this morning, and we were converting them to virtual events. And so we're still trying to get the customers, bring them in. It sounds like you are too with your advisory board. So we're still trying to bring them in and engage them. Obviously, it has to be a much shorter period of time, like we've already talked about, but still try to keep some momentum going with presenting the value and understanding, where their issues are right now, so we can be more helpful to them, specifically with issues around the pandemic. So that's what we've done with our marketing dollars.
And Bill, what I would like to add to what Laurie said, this is a subject which is very near and dear to my heart, given I have a global business development team attending about more than 40 trade shows across the globe, and everything has been stalled. So we had one of the largest customer conference slated just in next 2 months in Orlando. Everything now is digital. So we sort of took on a digital transformation journey last year. So this was well planned, and everything, all the return on investments is getting paid off. All the customers, we did our first event online. It was attended by more than 900 customers, and it was just super successful. So I think just to what Laurie said, the world is accepting digital transformation. Clients who are not very comfortable on video conferencing have started adopting to Microsoft Teams or Zoom. But more importantly, to what Mark said earlier about walk and talk, it's funny enough, and I can't resist to share this. One of my reps called me yesterday and said, I was on the third call with a customer and just discussing the final red line. He said, no more Zoom, just call me because old is gold. Just call me on the phone and let's close it. So it's interesting. It's all different modalities which are in play, but it works.
This is Prateek. I have a question for the group. There are definitely industries that are actually seeing higher demand because of whatever situation they are in right now. And there are obviously industries that are really hurting because of COVID. How are people trying to balance that? And even within companies, there are certain things that is of high demand, like work from home technologies are sprouting. So they need to adopt, even within the same company, there's more demand of certain things versus other things now. So how are people balancing that in their activities?
Are you talking about from the technology perspective and tools perspective, or behavior perspective?
No, in the sense that people attacking or looking for more business and more pipeline, right? There are certain industries that are struggling, and then there are other industries that are actually doing really well in this time. How are people managing the demand from industries that are actually increasing their business right now versus the other way?
So I'll give you a sense if you want. This is Abi. We have kind of all sides of the spectrum. We are kind of a microcosm of the situation here, right? So we have a explosion in demand for our conferencing services, for our mobility services, right? To the point where we have been sold out and backlogged on every single kind of cellular puck, right? So to say, hotspot device that we have, where we're going and repurposing from inventory old phones, unlocking them, finding ways to create the hotspot capabilities. We have demand from schools, from pop-up hospitals, that's through the roof. On the other hand, if you look at our media business, right, Warner Media, we are suffering tremendously because of the cancellation of sports and things of that nature. Linear advertising being pulled off because retailers are no longer open, right? So we've got kind of two sets of situations. So we have also within segments, right? Many of our larger customers and healthcare customers are going not just strong, but stronger than ever, grocers, while others are dead. So we are shifting personnel over between different segments to kind of account for that demand. The other thing we're trying to do is use and be creative. I think Somesh made a really interesting point that the world is adopting to digital transformation, right? So you can have a virtual event. You can try to tout your website, but if nobody knows it's there, guess what? they're not going to come there. So one of the things we discussed on our Warner Media side is we have a social amplification tool called Launchpad, which simultaneously publishes to all the social media platforms there are. And you can combine that with some really compelling custom content from Warner Media that draws the social person's attention in, like some really amazing statistics. And that suddenly has become what we are finding customers asking for and realizing that we hadn't really promoted this before because we had this in-demand linear inventory, which everybody fought for. And for us, it was a constrained supply situation, so for demand situation. Now that situation is flipped, so we are quickly adapting and realizing that we never put enough energy or excitement behind Launchpad, which, most customers are telling us, why the hell didn't you talk to me about this before? You're telling me you'll simultaneously publish my event or my message to all of these social media platforms, and you'll give me all the feedback collated across all the platforms with an audience targeting. And oh, by the way, you'll work on some custom, CNN grade production material for this. Why didn't you talk to us about it before? So we are discovering, what I'll call some green shoots in the middle of some of the devastation, right? So to say, in certain areas, and in other areas, we're just adapting by moving people and personnel between groups. And you have to be really nimble about this. On the healthcare side, we set up a war room, which is operating 7x24 right now to move circuits. We delivered 100 gig circuits, which typically take us 3-4 months because of in like 7 or 8 days. That's just like every rule book, every legal constraint went out the door because we had to stand and help one of our customers stand a hospital up. Lives were at stake. All the rules got thrown out. And we are starting to think through, how do I take some of these changes and actually institutionalize them? So I spoke a lot, but hopefully that gave you a sense.
Yeah. Hey, Chad, I was just going to make maybe one final comment here on this topic. If you guys are, and folks on the call, if you're avid book readers or you're in the habit of having your sales teams give the gift of insight via recommended reading, there was a really great book that came out years ago called Crossing the Chasm. That is a great book to give to C-level people as they think about go-to-market strategy and so forth. And there was almost a second writing, I would call it, of that book, which is called Zone to Win. I don't know if you guys can see this on video. Jeffrey Moore,
we can see.
Yep.
Yeah, same author. And just real quick, the 4 zones are performance, productivity, incubation, and transformation. And what I'm finding is, and I'm encouraging my team to share this with C-level executives, because it's very difficult to call into, like I'm in the South US and Latin America, it's difficult to call into the cruise line industry for sure, right? Those are docked and also getting a lot of negative press on social. And so if they want to survive, they've got to change their go-to-market, because it's not going to, even when we change sort of you have to be at home and you can now start to travel again, I'm not convinced that people are going to run to the cruise lines to jump on a cruise. And so now the challenge becomes, was there something that you were doing in your corporate strategy around incubation and transformation that you now need to expedite getting that maybe that new service or product in the marketplace, because the world has changed. And it's no different for retail. It's no different for FinServe. It's no different for a lot of these other industries that many of us call into. So just an idea and thought to maybe share with your teams.
Great point, Mark. And I promise you in the community that this was not prearranged, but actually Jeffrey Moore, the author that Mark just referenced, will be with me on Monday. And so all the community members on this call that would like to ask Jeffrey Moore questions, we're going to have dedicated time with him on how to operate in a sales environment in a COVID-19 world. So Jeffrey's been part of the community in the past with us, has spent a couple of dedicated sessions, and he's been gracious to agree on Monday of next week to spend some time with me. And so any questions that you have for him, please let Kasha know and I'll make sure to incorporate them. So great segue to our next, where I'd like to pivot a little bit is Lori's been in virtual selling for 20 years. So we want to pick her brain a little bit on what she's been doing instinctually over time to see how we might take a couple of nuggets. And so I want to turn it over to Lori to kind of guide us through some emerging best practices.
Thanks a lot, Chad. And I will say, Mark, both of those books are great. And at NetApp, we're living Zone to Win. So highly, highly agree with you on your recommendation. And I'll send you some questions, Kasha and Chad, for next Monday. As Chad said, I've spent a lot of time in virtual sales and virtual sales teams, and I'm sure Somesh will agree. We have some well-honed best practices that we've been living, forever, and we keep improving. We're about continuous improvement. So as Somesh mentioned, this was not the new normal for us to move to working from home. I mean, it is different in that most of our teams, I think, are centralized and there's a manager there. So you're in the office and it's an in the office job and you have a manager that's there to coach and mentor you. So there was a difference there. But in terms of how we operate, working from home was not dramatically different from what we do every day because we're a pretty structured organization. So we've come up with some tips here to share with you, and we're going to ask for some comments on this as we go through it. But, number one thing is communications. And a great example of that is the heartbeat meetings that Mark recommended. But I think it's critical to make sure you're being consistent. So yes, you can do a surprise communication, but make sure you're having the daily huddle or the heartbeat meetings. Make sure if you're having one-on-ones with your reps, which hopefully you were, that you continue to have those one-on-ones, and you're also spending time coaching and mentoring them during this time, and potentially even more so during this time, because they're going to be struggling with all the challenges that we talked about in the 2 slides ago. Maybe they have family challenges. Maybe they need to make adjustments to their work schedule. So the only way to really know that is to be communicating with them and helping them work those issues out while they're trying to get their work done and trying to deal with some of the challenges that they're having today. And the coaching culture is important now. Also, it's always important, but reps need to know they have to change their messaging. I'm sure they instinctively get this, but what's the new messaging for your company? How are you being empathetic with your potential buyers and customers? And also, what additional objections are they running into today that they may need help in being able to handle? So that's really important. And in some ways, depending on your business, if things have slowed down, there might be more time today to do some of this coaching. And if things have really amped up, maybe there's a little less time, but maybe you just have to send out nuggets for coaching. And with the right tools, for example, we have tools where we can listen to reps' calls, and there's AI technology involved, so we can hear specifically the feedback on the inference from the customer, or we can listen for keywords like budget or competition or whatever that might be pandemic specific. So we can coach them in small nuggets because we have these little sound bites we're listening to, or share with them some really great calls that maybe some of their peers had. And also taking the opportunity as a leader to do a ride along. I mean, you're already going on calls with your team, right? So why not do it on Zoom or on the phone, of course, or in some other format that the rep is working with. So you're making sure that you're there supporting them and you're hearing real time what is happening and what your team is dealing with. And the community is important. Have some fun, right? It can't all be about just be productive, work, do your calls, do your emails, etc. I think I've been to happy hour more in the last few months than I've been in the last year, all these virtual happy hours, but they're really fun. I mean, we play games, people bring their drinks, we talk about non-work things, we switch our backgrounds. I mean, we try to think of fun things we can do in these virtual happy hours. I've had some coffee breaks with my team, so we're not drinking all day with the happy hour. You can also, this is a little bit more work oriented, but you could have a war room. What if you need to work on deal strategy? Well, previously you would have gone in a conference room, you would have gone to your whiteboard, and you would have had a war room. Well, you can do the same thing with your Zoom meetings, or you could even have office hours. Like as a leader, I'm going to be available on Zoom. You can join me during this time if you have any questions. So I'm available to you if you need help during this, whatever, 1 hour window on Tuesday, whatever it works for your schedule. Make sure the team knows that you're there for them, especially like right now for us, it's quarter end. We're all on. So if at quarter end, you need to be there for deal strategy and help with closing, make sure you set up that war room. And then from a fun work perspective, can you do contests with your team? Some of them might be silly. Some of them could be driving better performance, although granted, it's difficult to do that now in some cases, but keep it fun while you're also trying to support what you're doing with achieving your business objectives. And then KPIs are so important. The great thing about virtual sales is we have lots of KPIs and we have systems and tools where we can track, every phone call, every connection, how much time they talked, emails, social, everything they're doing. And this is not to be draconian because we want to watch over them. It's really to help them. If we have somebody who says, I'm really struggling to make my number, and maybe they're not making the same mix of calls and emails and stuff that other team members are doing, you could share that. Hey, maybe if you change this around. Or if they're not making it and then they're not really doing anything, you can also see that, because if you're not in the office, you can't really walk around your team and say, are you on the phone? Are you having this meeting? Are you doing this? But with the metrics that you have on the tools that are available today, you can certainly have those metrics available just to make sure people are on track or to help keep them on track if they're having trouble. And so it's really important. If you don't have those metrics, this is a great time to implement dashboards. Your IT department's still available to help you, and make sure you put it in place, because these are metrics that you don't need just now. You still need them when you get back to the office. So I was going to start with those 5. Mark, I think I'll turn it over to you because I know Somesh is going to do, I think, the next 5. So that, I think it'll be a better flow if you have any comments right now, and then we'll go to Somesh.
No, I think you summed it up very well. There was a lot of color you added beyond the 5 and added some context there. So I don't have anything else to add. I think it's just it's taking what you can effectively do in a 5-day work week, incorporating fun into it. Creativity becomes a pillar in and amongst itself. And I think we just have to think outside the box a little bit here to keep things as fresh as possible. So it's not like Bill Murray and Groundhog Day, where it's like, what day of the week is it now? It's just everything looks the same every day, every day, every day. So really good perspective, Lori. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Somesh, did you want to add anything here, or do you want to go to the next slide? How do you want to do this?
No, I'll just continue with the theme, but for benefit of everyone, what Lori covered, those 5 best practices, I think they are very fundamental, not just to virtual sales, but every type of seller, whether they are a field seller now working from home, because they are very much applicable to mid-market, SMB, or enterprise sales. And just to continue with that theme of B2B value selling and best practices, I'm sure you'll all agree it's evident we need to continue selling, but in the current context, it is more important to focus on value selling. We have a big role to play as not only a customer's trusted advisor, but also a cheerleader, which takes me to the next 5 best practices. To me personally, it's all about building confidence and trust, whether in person or through virtual. That is fundamental and table stakes. And in the current COVID-19 situation, it's changing our work lives. More importantly, it's how we adapt, and more importantly, how we train our workforce to have a change in the sales mindset and behavior. I call it the COVID-19 leaders test, because it's all about what Lori alluded to. How do the leaders coach, mentor, and motivate the sales workforce to adapt and pivot quickly to successfully continue selling, more importantly in this virtual and digital world, and in many profound ways. So how do teams continue successfully sell, adapt, and more importantly, work from home, even when the customer is also working in that home environment? One is, of course, to set some sales norms for buyers meeting. And the first rule, which I mentioned to my team, is make sure you make the selling process very simple. People, clients, suppliers, all are working in a home environment, which means we need to really keep it very, very simple. Timelines and sales cycles are now getting shorter. The client's span of attention is very small, and you need to really deliver key value and message in that short span of time. Which takes me to the next best practice, which is about value messaging and content. In marketing, they say content is key. And one of the things which I really like in the ecosystem services roundtables as well as the platform is actionable insights. So I think Prateek mentioned about which industries we should probably prospect into and which industries we should avoid. It's very different between B2B and B2C, but it's all about having a platform and cadence. And I tell my team, always remember what I call the 3 R's. Do you have the content which is relevant to the buyer persona and to the prospect or client you're trying to position your products and service? Second, if it is relevant, make it relatable to their industry vertical, which is really delivers the benefits and value. And we'll talk about how other different platforms, including the ecosystem service platform, can help deliver that value. And third is keep on building relationships. These are times which Mark also mentioned. Keep on calling clients, check on them. It's not just about selling. I would say helping is selling and selling is not helping in these times. So the 3 R's, which I'll again summarize, is relevance, related to the industry and verticals, and keep on building relationships. Last but not the least, it's all about not only coverage, but about how do you make your staff productive. Everyone says I'm busy, right from morning till evening, but are they really productive? And that's where I think a platform process comes in place. You need to make sure that, as they say, data speaks louder than words, and what you measure, you can progress. And Laurie and I have definitely been tracking a lot of KPIs, given that we have a more disciplined and structured team who doesn't travel much. It's all about how do you make sure that the reps are productive? Are you checking on them? Are you motivating them? And more importantly, are you teaching them? For those who are on video, I don't know if you see this pin on my coat. This is what we call the TLC pin, Teach, Learn, Challenge. So we invite all our different reps once in a week to share best practices, including the managers. And not only they share best practices in this virtual world, but also what everyone is doing globally. And more importantly, we challenge ourselves. What else we can do for the client? Are we being a client's trusted advisor? Are we being empathetic? Are we really transforming the customer experience to human experience, which I call HX? And these are some best practices I would summarize from 6 to 10. I would like to invite Laurie or Mark to add more color, and then we'll open it up to the group.
Yeah, I'll just maybe I'll just conclude, because I want to be cognizant of time. I was told early on in my career that you had a great day if you experience all of the emotions and you learn one thing. And so I think on these calls I'm learning quite a bit, and so hopefully it'll be a great day and I don't cry as much as I laughed today. So I just want to say that sales, in my opinion, and I think probably a common opinion amongst all of us, is that it comes down to coverage and conversion. And so now we have to think in this virtual world and the challenges and the demands that we have on us to be productive. Are we effectively covering the land that has been given to us, the franchise that's been given to us, and are we converting our business? And put some thought around that. So really great perspective. I appreciate Somesh.
Great stuff, guy. I love the interaction and the cross ideas that are coming through. Maybe we'll just pivot to our final segment. We wanted Somesh, and with Mark and Laurie's help, to kind of talk about, based on some of these best practices that we're seeing, how can we go in and be productive out of the gate in a work from home environment. So we're going to have Somesh kind of talk about the platform that the members have access to, community members, and let him kind of walk through that with us.
Sure. So I presume everyone is looking at the screen, but if you are just dialed in, let me sort of set the context. We talked about a lot of best practices, but sales is really something which is an art and a science. It's all about data, and it really boils down to 3 perspectives or 3 things, which I like always everything in. We need to measure the productivity of our sales force and our business development or SDRs. We need to have a platform which really gives different perspective and data points to a leader. How are the reps progressing? How are they closing and converging, which Mark alluded to? Are they really building more pipeline, which is typically 3.5 or 4x? And more importantly, are we also having a sales cadence? Are they sending out relevant content to either a prospect or a buyer? And my personal experience using the ecosystem platform has been very, very beneficial. I started using the platform just a few months back, but have seen tremendous benefit. And more importantly, also trying to be ambassador to other segments across my business who have either a SaaS platform or trying to prospect into different customer base and buyer personas. In terms of, if you go to the next slide, Kasha, in terms of value delivery, I think one thing which is very essential is if you have a pre-sales organization, as we build on the RFPs and different proposals, I think value messaging and outcome is very key. Sometimes I've seen deals which are multi-million dollars have complex components. And in those components, I think really defining and lining out the different value is very important. And then how is it going to translate into either revenue outcomes for the client or prospect, or bring down their operational cost? Because every CFO or CIO or a decision maker really looks at three things. Again, is it going to improve my revenue? Is it going to decrease my cost? Or as Mark said, is it going to improve my productivity? So this platform really gives all the different aspects and elements of productivity, outcome-based selling, and more importantly, the whole workforce productivity. I'll hand it to Laurie and Mark to add further to their experience on this platform. And Kasha, you can progress to the other next slides.
So from
Mark or Laurie?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
No, go ahead, Laurie. All you.
Okay, so actually where we are with the platform is we've been evaluating, because we've been changing our CRM over to a new platform so we could get all those KPIs that I talked about earlier. So we're in the process of doing an evaluation and seeing how we can actually incorporate this into our process. But what I saw from the demo that we've seen is I really think I can definitely see how this would increase our deal velocity and enable us to package the information for our customers in a much more concise way, which we talked about earlier, right? You need to be much more concise with your messaging. So once you get to this point, to package it in a way with a very clear and simple ROI and be able to advance your sales cycle much more quickly. So that's the way we see using it once we are able to implement it on our new platform.
Yeah, maybe just a closing comment here is, all of us have been selling probably for quite some time and leading teams. I always come back to the why buys, right? It's why do anything, why do it with your company and your service and products that you're positioning, and then why now? And usually it comes down to those three things, and it's got to be compelling enough to make a move on each of them. The why anything is the targeted business outcome, which Somesh said was related to revenue, cost, and productivity, or even mitigating brand risk, depending on what you're selling. And then why it's the technical or commercial differentiation that you bring to the table is the best alternative to invest that money. I think in today's age, we know that there's even more scrutiny now by the CFO down to every penny that's being spent. So we have to be cognizant that it's maybe not always us versus the core competitor or do nothing. It could be also that they're looking beyond your product or service to things like employees or mergers and acquisitions or something else. So we got to be very cognizant that it's not just us versus the competitor technically. And then the final one, which is usually the hardest, is the why now. Why is it so compelling that I need to spend dollars with you in April versus waiting until July? And so I think that what we see in this platform is being able to encapsulate a lot of those data points to drive the why buy with the buyer.
So really the platform sort of summarizes, as Mark said, or I would use the word encapsulates the different values, which we call the values from a B2B selling. And I will hand it over to Chad, probably to a little bit elaborate on those 6 elements of value. Chad, over to you.
Thank you, Somesh. Great dialogue. As many of you know, in fact, I know Jamie Cleghorn's on our session today. Bain Company is a member of the advisory ecosystem community. And Bain Jamie Claycorn, along with his colleague Eric Almquist, put together some very thought-provoking leading research on why do B2B buyers, or what do B2B buyers see as value in a relationship with a supplier, all of which we play that role as a supplier into our customer base. And so it was robust research. It represents over 1,000 plus B2B surveys. And you'll see here on the right-hand side of the screen, this what is called this value pyramid. And so it really came down to looking at various different elements of value, as Bain represents them, that could see potential impact between a supplier-customer relationship. What's interesting, and we'll make sure all of this research is available to all of the members. What's interesting is Jamie and Eric and Bain have been looking at nuancing the pyramid a little bit, or looking at these elements that may be rising up in importance in this very uncertain time that we're faced with. And so it's represented around these 6 elements of value. And we wanted to just make sure, A, you're aware that Bain and the research are available to sales leaders and customer success leaders in the ecosystem community. And B, let you know that maybe there's some nuggets on the left-hand side here around reduced anxiety or risk reduction, or ways that you can, in your next customer conversation, talk about stability or flexibility that could be very targeted in this environment and help differentiate you to our mission, help you make your value clear in those subsequent conversations. So again, available for each of you. And we'll be diving into this session further on May the 21st. We're going to have a committed, totally dedicated session where we look at the B2B elements of value with our lead in that track, Dave Coker, Vice President of Customer Success at Metadata Solutions. We'll be hosting that session. Jamie's been gracious at Bain to be part of that as well, to be a resource for the leaders here to understand the research and how it applies. But just know that that will be further deep dives on how we can take these elements of value, understand some of the nuances of this new environment, and have very targeted COVID-19 type of value story messaging going forward. I know Jamie's on the phone. Jamie, did you want to add any color or commentary to the 6 elements that Bain put forward?
Not in detail. I think it's kind of intuitive to us as sellers and customer-facing people that messages need to change and adapt, and we just find this a useful way to sort of be methodical and thinking through how do you actually, what's the Rosetta Stone for what are those messages that could resonate, and how do you really zero in on the ones that do. What we find is if you do it at a gut level, you'll get to half the right answer. If you do it in a methodical way, you'll get to a more thorough and comprehensive answer.
Thank you, Jamie. Great, and again, we'll have more time on it. So this is a little sneak peek into the upcoming events. We have Ashvin, who's the Chief Customer Officer at Gainsight, going to be leading an event with the community around churn in a COVID-19 world. That's May 7th. And then, as I discussed, the May 21st event will be a virtual workshop on the B2B elements of value with the community. I want to turn it back to our hosts. I love this session. We had 50 plus people, great attendance. We've got great comments in the chat boards. Maybe turn it back to Mark, Lori, and Somesh for some closing comments as we draw the curtain to our time together. I'll start with Mark.
Yeah, listen, the world has changed. We know it. We're living it. And I don't see it being much different. Aspects will change, of course, as we re-enter. But businesses are going to have to operate a completely different way. And we've got to be agile enough to be able to respond and stay ahead of that. And so a lot of dialogue throughout the course of the last 55 minutes on this. And as leaders of our organizations, we've got to be cognizant of both the internal and external aspects of this change that many people don't even go through once in a lifetime that we're experiencing now. So really, really good content today. I appreciate the chats and the discussion from the teams, and look forward to revisiting this perhaps in 6 months and see what happened in the crystal ball that we were looking into.
That's great, Mark. Yeah, that would be nice to do a closed loop on it. Lori, how about you?
Well, so thanks for inviting me to this session. I really appreciate being able to participate. And I would just say overall that I think the key thing is, look at how things are going with your sales force, because not only is it my belief in terms of the importance of virtual sales growing, but I see a lot of commentary from, companies like Gartner and McKinsey that they're seeing companies talk about this. So, don't be resistant, embrace it, because that is going to be more of the future. I'm certainly not saying there will be no field sales, because you absolutely need that, but I do think it's going to shift more. So I think it's important that everybody just be ready for what's going to happen coming out of this.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you for your best practice tips, and we'll close out with Somesh.
Thanks, Chad, for inviting us for this meeting. I would say one thing I did learn is we have a very diverse group and very rich conversations. I learned a lot. There's a lot of good idea exchange and cross-pollination, and I'm sure we'll benefit from the other sessions as well. One thing I did observe from the chat window, there are a lot of folks who are heading customer success, so I'll highly encourage you to leverage the platform. And as Chad said, this is open to all the community members. Back to you, Chad.
Thank you, Somesh. Yeah, just a fine point on that. This platform, digital platform for value realization, is part of the community. Please engage Kasha so that we can help you have an unfair advantage in your customer conversations. I'll close with Mark and Lori and Somesh. Thank you greatly. We are just always grateful that members step up and lead sessions. Had a great mixture of people that have been in virtual selling for many years, folks that are pivoting to it. Terrific dialogue. So Mark, Lori, Somesh, thank you greatly for your hosting of the session. Thank you, community members, for yet another highly engaged, very collaborative session. And I will close by saying stay healthy and stay positive all.